we have task leaders that are working discreetly on leading small groups of individuals to ensure that we're staying on track and that we meet our timelines based on some of the information that we have. And then finally, in terms of closure, we're going to finalize all activities. So when we come to the point of having a final product, we memorialize it, and then in turn we share it with each other for future use or immediate use based on the timelines that we have set forth or the phases that we're looking at. These are the 6 areas that we're looking at. Number 1, or key focus. First is logistics, that is planning for the year-end activity. So this is what's happening now, whether it's the pickup of the materials that parents have had to and students, their own belongings, whether it's the return of books, the ceremonies that are taking place across the district that have normally taken place around this time of year, that falls in that area of logistics. Under health and safety, those are protocols to help address health and safety items. Allison Perriott has been instrumental. She's our nurse coordinator in helping guide some of those decisions and working with the nursing staff as well as other experts from the region to help us and kind of guide us in that area. Next is under social emotional wellness. We know that we're going to need to address currently and as students and staff and parents return the social emotional needs of our families. And I'll share a little bit about what some of those plans begin to look like. Number 4, which is obviously one of the core items that we need to consider, is the manner in which we deliver instruction. So we've learned a lot. We've gotten a lot of feedback from our families. We've gotten a lot of feedback from our staff. And we know that based on the scenarios we have, we're going to need to make sure that the instructional practices continue to improve. We know the discussions about asynchronous and synchronous. We know that if we were to move into a more virtual setting or continue in this virtual setting, that we have to elevate the synchronous practices. And so we're looking and discussing what that looks like. Operations and finance, it's basically the resources that we need to allocate to ensure that we have and give our families and students the resources they need to make sure they're safe in these learning environments. And finally, communication. And that's an item that we're working out really closely in communicating with all stakeholders and making sure that also that it's very, very effective in the manner in which we communicate as well. These are basically the 3 scenarios we're working from. And I share this with the following, in that we know that even though we may start in one scenario, that we may need to consider pivoting to another scenario over the course of a school year. And so this is not so rigid, and more so what I want to share is that we recognize that this has to be fluid, and we're preparing ourselves to be fluid and understand what we need to do based on the medical concerns that may arise or new medical information that presents itself that might help us move towards what would be ideal, which is 100% in scenario 1. So scenario 1 is basically all in person without physical distancing. That, in my opinion, and I'm positive that, or very, I'm assured and probably guess that most of us would like to be in that scenario number 1. Number 2 is reopening with some combination of in-person and distance learning, often termed a hybrid model, and considering the public health mitigation strategies that we'll receive. And the last is basically where we are right now in scenario 3, which is all distant learning and everything is provided virtually, and we'll call it all virtual or with synchronous and asynchronous practices. So these represent the 3 sort of scenarios that we're looking at across the district and building schedules, plans, and others around each of them. Again, with the caveat that we haven't necessarily received any guidance from the State Education Department at this point. But I would just share that we're not going to wait, and we haven't waited for the state to give us that guidance. So as soon as they do, we'll be prepared to pivot on our own in terms of more so confirming our plans moving forward. So I want to share, and there's a number of administrators and educators that have been part of this. And this is a focus on our social emotional learning. We know and recognize it's come to our attention not only through our staff and our families, but just generally the social emotional needs of our students in any time of year is important, but certainly now as we've started to move forward with a reentry or reopening model for the 2021 school year. So all our teachers, I wanted to assure you, we brought in Dr. Kavanaugh to begin doing some work with all staff members. We're also partnering with Andrus and WJCS to provide some learning on the go. That's professional development for our staff under various models, whether it's mindfulness or trauma 101. So those are major categories. The first is for everybody, the second, some choice. And then we're also looking regionally at ways in which we can partner and provide additional staff development for our staff through BOCES. We have a strong social-emotional learning strategic plan that has been developed. And we're looking to not only implement with existing staff we have in district, but leveraging some of the strong partners that we have across our district, across the region, and within our community to help us. Surveys are being prepared in advance. I encourage you to participate because it'll give us strong information about our children, about the needs of our families, so that we can better be prepared to adapt and make sure that our system has adapted to the needs of the families upon entering in our students. And finally, there's additional staff development that you can see, or professional learning that we're setting ourselves up for September already. So there's a lot of work that's being done as it relates to social emotional learning when we look at the upcoming school year.
Dr. Sanchez, not to interrupt, but you have a question so far. I don't know if it's easier as we're going through as it relates to the slides. But somebody's asking, what are the thresholds to determine each scenario? Are they based off the phases by the state, and will we deviate?
Yeah, so right now I would just say that generally speaking, that everything will be based on what the state guidelines are and the guidance we get from the state education department and the medical professionals. Throughout this, and I would just say, as an educator, where I rely on heavily and is that of the decisions and the recommendations we get from the medical professionals. Obviously, locally, we may need to pivot and make our own decisions, but generally speaking, once again, what's really important is that most, if not all, our decisions, beyond the instructional part of it, will be contingent on the guidance we get from the state, which will be based on that of medical professionals, and moving forward. With that, when we pivot, and I've been using the term pivot, when we move from scenario to scenario, that again would be based on some guidance that either we created locally, but again, the basis of that is the research and the medical professionals receiving information from.
Okay, and we have one more. Have we looked into other facilities in Ossining that could accommodate students in addition to the schools, perhaps community center?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and one that we're considering. So a lot of that right now is based on the scenarios that that I outlined before. So what building administrators are doing now is creating various instructional models, and based on that, determining the need for space across not only their building, but across the district. So for example, we have talked about, not to say that this would happen, because I want to just be clear, this is hypothetical. If we needed to use the high school as the space throughout the elementary, we look at all 6 buildings, that may be a potential that we've talked about. Not to say that obviously our high school students need their space as well. And also looking at what the potential is for utilizing space within the community. I have not done the outreach to our community just yet because I'm not sure exactly what the needs might be, but it is one of the items that we're considering as we proceed and move forward.
Okay. And just a couple more questions. They seem to be along the same topic.
Yep.
In scenario 2 or 3, will there be certain minimum requirements for teachers on synchronous learning? Currently it varies.
Yeah, so in a subsequent slide, and hopefully I respond to that, you'll see our discussions around instruction. So if I don't answer that question, then certainly feel free to add more. But yes, we hope to have conversations with our staff and set forth some real parameters and expectations that we can clearly articulate to our families and to our students as well.
Yeah, most of the questions that are coming in are pertaining to the amount of in-person instruction. Right. Okay, do you want to continue? We have a lot coming in, but if you want to go a little bit more, and then I'll try to summarize what we're getting in here.
Okay, so the next is digital equity. So we know that if we go into a virtual environment in either way, whether it's a hybrid model or fully virtual, that technology is going to be really important. We've also learned along the way some of the challenges that families are facing relative to the use of technology. In some cases where families share a computer or a device. So we're looking to ensure moving forward that we can elevate the access to technology for all students, 3 through 12 with devices, but also using what we'll term legacy technology to help support our students pre-K through 12. So our hope, quite honestly, is through some of the resources that we've allocated and reallocated to ensure that every child has technology moving forward into the upcoming school year in hand, should we need to do that. And why we're not necessarily looking to purchase any new ones for pre-K through 12 is because developmentally, or pre-K through 2 is because developmentally, it's number one, it's a large investment for what could be a 1-year need for our students. So our goal is to ensure that some of the challenges we face with technology are things that we're working towards and addressing immediately. So there is going to be a timeline though for families and parents to bring back some of the technology they have in their homes. We're trying to extend it as far as we can, so all the way up to August 8th, or sorry, 7th. But the reason why we need to bring it is because we need to take inventory, we need to collect, we need to upgrade, and we need to redistribute. In not necessarily in that order, but we need to make sure that any items we receive that we can begin to reallocate to our students the newer technology and redistribute some of the existing technology to all our students. But the goal is to ensure that everyone has the technology they need. And these have been part of our reentry discussions to this point.
Some of the other questions, Dr. Sanchez, is there any flexibility if the state says that schools may open with scenario 1, but will parents have the option of scenario 2 if that is their preference?
Yeah, so these are items, quite honestly, that we haven't necessarily fully discussed. We know that this might be scenarios that families present to our district. What I would say is that generally speaking, that if our schools are safe for students to return, then my general message is that obviously we want all our students to be back and present in the school setting, particularly if it's scenario number 1, because basically what we would have heard at that point is that schools are safe to re-enter. Any other scenarios thereafter, those are discussions that we can have, but what we'd like to, I'd say just generally speaking, that the idea is that if the schools are safe to open, that we want all students to be in the buildings with us at that time or participating in the various scenarios that I've outlined thereafter.
Okay, and as far as safety on school buses for scenarios 1 and 2, have we looked into that?
Yeah, so great question, and we're looking at that very carefully as well. We're starting to receive some guidance around transportation, but again, keeping in mind that nothing formal has necessarily been presented to us from the state education department and or the state at all. But we've started to look at what some of the scenarios are in other states. It will present a challenge for us if we have to socially distance on the buses. So, and a significant challenge, I would say, without sharing immediate details, but we've started to look at what that might look like. But it would be a challenge because obviously, many of you know how many students we have on a bus, sometimes 2, and in some cases, we may have 3 to a seat. And so if we have to social distance, basically it's, almost every other seat within the bus. So it's a real challenge for us as it relates to transportation. And once again, all the more reason for us to begin those conversations now so we can problem solve and have those discussions not only with our transportation department, but also with the Board of Education and with our community as well.
Okay, I'm just going to give you one more before you go to the next slide. There's a lot of research regarding outdoors, and outdoors is safer during this time. Are there any considerations to have a mostly outdoor school day? Is that a possibility at all?
Yeah, so these again, part of tonight will be for you to provide some feedback for us of items you'd like us to consider or you think we should be considering. The truth is, and I'll say this, sincerely, is that this is where, at this point, I think we have 334 attendees. and everyone's perspective is really valuable. The more lenses and perspectives we get as we refine our decisions, I think the stronger our decisions are. So I would encourage you, at the end, we're going to open up the chat box for everyone to kind of share some ideas and type in there, because we're going to use those to bring back to our committee, share with our administrative team, and share with our staff of items that our families have recommended in our community as well. So towards the end, I'd encourage you to really just kind of jot some of those things down for us as well. But every idea is a good idea is really where I want to leave. Okay. So I just want to walk into the health and safety. There's a lot of items that we've started to consider. And again, I want to give much of the credit to Allison Perriott, our nurse coordinator, who's been sort of facilitating, I'll term her as our task leader on our strategic model or plan that we're seeking to develop. These are the items. This is a direct document from the CDC that we're looking at following. And this is the only, they provided to this point in time. But I do want to share some of the things that that she and the team and others have started to work on. First of all, looking at creating health screening protocols based on the New York State Department of Health guidance. We've already started to work on that, or I would say when I say we, Allison and the team have started to work on that. Continuing to educate, we've started to develop lesson plans and protocols and information that we're going to need to get out to stress various important aspects that we know have been important and been reiterated throughout this time, i.e. Hand washing, the importance of social distancing, proper use of masks and covering, when to stay home, cleaning and disinfecting. So these are all items that we're looking at updating safety protocols and training our staff, but also educating our families. So that is already started, because we anticipate nonetheless that these are all just items that are really important for us to begin to consider. We are looking at ways, when there's any hesitation, to begin communicating with families about keeping their child home, particularly if they're sick. I know we've had a strong attendance message out there about students coming to school. Obviously, we want them engaged in learning, but at the same time, if they're sick, we'll be giving you some protocols that you're going to want to need to consider before having anyone come back to school. And ensuring additional precautions, particularly for staff or students that are high risk. She's already working on some protocols that we are as a district, and tracking student and staff attendances to ensure that we kind of get some better information relative to what's happening amongst our students and staff. Plan for students and staff who get sick at school, ensuring that all suspected and confirmed cases are immediately isolated and sent home. Those are plans and protocols that are already beginning and in the works. Ensuring regular communication around various information that's given to us. And then I'll just move on to the last piece, which is updating our cleaning protocols. And we've already started to knowing that these are items that if we can pre-purchase, we will. Just some cleaning protocols and cleaning materials that we know every district will be likely fighting for. So if we can get a head start, then certainly we'll have the materials in hand as we start the school year.
Dr. Sanchez, I'm just going to give you a few more questions so we could get them going. ESY program this summer, will there be in person? Any final?
No, right now we're having those conversations. The ESY, I know that the State Education Department came out with, or no, it wasn't the State Education Department. Let me clarify. The governor shared that. There are some challenges in being able to offer that program in the school setting. Right now, we still continue to make plans to go to implement that program virtually. However, if anything should change, we'll make sure that we'll inform all the families. Obviously, we would love to and ideally have the students in the physical setting, but there are a lot of parameters that we need to consider that may limit us from maybe being able to do so. And it looks as if right now that it's not likely that we'll be able to do that, have the students in the building, but more conversations are taking place. But right now, I would suspect that it's fair to say that it's going to be virtual moving forward.
Okay. And another question is somebody in the district that they work for is planning on 100% on campus in September, but with the possibility of masks or social distancing. Is that an option we would implement here?
Yeah, so that's all contingent on the plans that we hear from the state. Based on those guidelines, if we are able to go 100% and the one parameter associated with that, or the variable, or two, I should say, in this case, based on the example you just shared, is having masks and social distancing, then, obviously that's what we would do, is really seek. However, I have to say this with a caveat in that in a school setting, you can just imagine pre-K students through high school, that social distancing, we will do our best, obviously, to put the parameters in place, but it still remains a challenge nonetheless. But with that, we'll educate, we'll put the appropriate signage, we'll train, we'll talk to everyone about that. But the answer is yes. If we can come in, I mean, I would just say generally, as superintendent and as an educator, if we could, we would go 100%. That's the ideal and what we're all hoping for. With that said, though, obviously the medical and health is going to be a variable that's going to determine whether we can go scenario 1, 2, or 3.
Okay, and one last question I'm going to give you. So if a parent has a student, say in 3rd grade and 5th grade, are we going to work towards making sure that their children are going to be going to school on the same days, so that if the parent is working, they don't have multiple days?
So the answer is we've had that conversation, but I can't say with certainty that's the case. However, I'd encourage you, that same idea, if you want us to consider it, these are the type of things, that's our intention tonight, is to gather some of this information, some of these ideas that you say from a parental perspective, and even from having seen your child, things that you want us to consider as we continue to work towards finalizing these plans, whether it's things to consider in scenario 1, 2, or 3. At the end, we're going to provide you a few moments to put that into the chat box so we can take those back and talk further about it. But that's we know the challenges, and we know the challenge that not having your child in school presents to our families as it relates to work and other things that they need to get done. So we're working hard, obviously, to ensure that there's consistency, number 1. 2, working towards getting as many students in on a daily basis as we can.
Okay.
All right.
Questions, but if you want to go on and then.
Let me just go on through these, and then I'll, if you want to just share them in a few minutes. So this is just some of the others, and I know that there's a variety of educators working towards this, actually all educators, as it relates to the instruction. And this is a major question I know some of the families were asking relative to, will we be asynchronous? Will we see more synchronous practices? And so the contingent on the scenarios, we realize that that will dictate the manner in which we provide instruction. So what's really important is that at this point, we have received feedback from our staff. We've been meeting with them at the building level. We intend to put information out and to gather even more feedback from our students and families that will guide our work. With that said, I would be remiss if I didn't say that some families have already started to either email me or email some of our staff members around things for us to consider, things that are working, challenges they're facing, and items that they want us to consider if this were to continue into the 2020-21 school year. And let's just start with September. So your feedback is really important. That's why we're even, we're here tonight to share, but also provide you an opportunity and a forum to jot down some of those ideas you want us to consider. Scheduling is going to dictate the manner in which we provide that instruction, and the conversation around asynchronous and synchronous practices. The amount of time, I'm not sure just yet, but I would share with you very honestly that we recognize that there's a need to provide additional synchronous time for our students. And we're having those conversations as we will be having those conversations and have had those conversations about elevating the amount of time that our students have with their teacher or their educator, as well as even with our administrative team as well. So we recognize that, but there has to be a balance in this, because we also have to be very careful and balance how much time our kids are on the screens throughout a day. So more to come on that, but we're working, and I assure you that this is a critical piece of our planning that we're going to need to address and have started to address. We're going to need to make adjustments to our curriculum, recognizing that our students at this point have maybe missed on some concepts that we would have otherwise been able to get to over the course of the school year when we've had physical opportunities to work with them within our building. And then obviously the integration of social emotional needs are also going to need to be considered, as well as how are we going to know where they are upon entering, and that is in the form of assessments. And two, how will we assess our students over the course of a school year? Should we be more virtual than in the building? So those are items that we're all working towards and we're considering. What I don't have for you right now is exactly what it looks like. As you can see, there's a lot of general statements being made, but we intend to, in all areas, provide you real, concrete examples of what everything will look like. And so I just want to conclude with this and then give you the opportunity to chat, put some thoughts to paper. Is number one, our next steps is to continue studying various options. There's a lot of ideas, and we're also talking regionally with districts around the region about what they're doing, so that to the extent that we can align ourselves, we think that that might be beneficial not only for our staff members, but also for our families as well. And that's not an easy task, but we're having those conversations. We anticipate official New York State guidance coming out very, very soon. My own personal opinion, I think it's a little late to be providing the guidance. We need it now, so that if we're going to have enough time to plan for September, whether it's purchasing materials or other additional planning, the sooner we have this information, the better. With that said, as you know, we started this conversation in April with our staff members or with the reopening committee. And also just know too that the state education department will not likely issue its recommendations, because they also have a task force till July 13th, which will be presented to the Board of Regents, and then soon after, presented to school districts. So not until almost mid-July that in some cases we're going to get recommendations. I understand too that we're going to have to submit a plan to the state education department on or around July that officially notes, or I'm assuming, the various ways that we're going to meet the goal of either scenario 1, 2, or 3. Feedback from various stakeholders will continue, i.e. this will not be the last time that we'll engage families and gather feedback or community members. And we're going to continue to meet. And every meeting will lead to refinement and strengthening our plan. It's really critical. Some of the ideas you've already shared or things that you'd like us to consider are really important for us to know and understand, because it'll help us make better plans. Quite honestly, this is all new to us, and what we're doing right now is studying, learning, so that we can put forth the best type of instructional plan and safety that considers the safety of our students. So more to come on that. So these are the questions. I'm going to ask Nicole to maybe share some of the questions, but then I'm going to pose some questions to you. And there are 2 of them, and I'm going to give you a few moments, maybe about 5 minutes, to just jot these ideas on paper or virtually in the chat room, so that we can we can take those and bring them back, and just know that every thought that you put on paper will be reviewed, will be discussed, and will be considered as we move forward with our planning for 2021. So Nicole, are there any questions right now that you want to just kind of put out there, and then I'll give everyone an opportunity, and those that don't have any questions, if you want to move directly into the chat, is that okay, Nicole?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions coming in. I'm just going to try to summarize some. Temperature scans for students coming into the building. Have we thought or considered that?
Yeah, so 2 things we're starting to consider, and again, I'd encourage you to put it into the chat room of items that you want us to think about. But we've already started to think about, we've made some purchases already in advance of some thermometers that we're going to need across the district. We've also looked at the potential of, but no formal plans just yet, of having to use multiple entrances to our school. So that'll help us obviously mitigate the need to social distance, get our kids in sooner than having to wait if we had to take each person's temperature. And we're also looking at some other systems. We're hesitant to make the purchases just yet without the guidance, but there are some more advanced technology that we may need to consider for efficiency perspective and obviously safety as well. So we are thinking about that. and or have thought about that. Purchases have been made of thermometers, and we're also looking at multiple entrances to our schools. We've also considered the amount of adults that might be able to enter or not enter our building over the course of the day. So there might be discussions about how much time can parents be in a building, if not at all, during the year, while we're dealing with the pandemic. But more to come on that. But I just want to share that the amount of conversation we had has gone to that level. So I guess more to come on all of these. Nicole, anything else?
Yep. Questions related to like our school nurses offices. Is there any plans in place to separate students that are, come in sick until parents can come and pick up the child?
So we've, and again, I give a lot of credit to Allison Perriott, but she's also working with our director of facilities. We are looking at places to isolate students should there be concerns about their health and wellness safeties that could be jeopardizing the health and wellness of everybody else. For the most part, that can be done within the existing nurse's office. However, there are, I think, 2 buildings that we're looking for alternative spaces for that. But we will have places to isolate our students while parents come to pick them up, for any illnesses that they're dealing with. So thank you for that question, and it just kind of reiterates the importance of what we're doing, and we have thought that out, and we have plans for that as well.
And is there any extra support for our school nurses? Have we considered additional?
Yeah, so we've had that conversation. We have not taken any steps as it relates to staffing. Obviously, there's costs associated, but health and wellness is obviously critical. As soon as we know the decisions related to either scenario 1, 2, or 3, then we'll make those decisions relative to staffing, and how we allocate our staff. How we use staff when we're physically in a building might be very different, and likely is very different than we're 100% virtually. So we're looking at that really carefully, and we just had Tuesday, the conversation took place with Allison about what might be some additional needs that they have, and truthfully, it might even be, I wouldn't be surprised if there might be needs for additional custodial staff that might need to be considered. So all those things, we haven't made any decisions. We may or may not need. However, we're prepared for the what ifs as well, and having those conversations.
Okay. Any kind of plans for plexiglass in the classrooms?
Yep. So we're looking at that again, once again, some of the guidance. We've started to have those conversations, particularly at the main entrances when staff are coming in and parents are checking in. And how will we have the plexiglass? I'm not sure just yet, because there's been differences, and this isn't me saying it from like my guidance, but we have to buy the appropriate plexiglass, because there's also fire restrictions that certainly we need to consider. Not my rules, but obviously we have 2 sides that need to be considered. And to the extent that would happen in the classroom, we're not sure. We haven't heard that there's a need within the classroom so much as there would be a need in other spaces. But again, we're learning and we're dialoguing about that now, and making some adjustments. Particularly, we're going to likely need to consider that in areas like cafeterias, and particularly main entrances when parents are coming in and checking in at each of the buildings.
Okay. Would we still plan to hold, I'm assuming this is if we go back to a regular full school day, recess, gym, lunch in the lunchroom? Would it be a full regular day, regular schedule, or would we make any kind of accommodations?
Yeah, so there's a variety of questions on that, and again, that'll come down to to schedule. The manner in which we deliver lunch may vary. We're going through various scenarios and talking to our staff and talking to our providers. And what I mean by that specifically is there might be a need to have lunch in the classroom. That's been a discussion. Again, these are just all hypotheticals, so there's no confirmation, but scenarios I wouldn't say that we're considering, but a lot of that will be driven more so by the guidance that we receive from the State Education Department and Department of Health. But just know that actually our Assistant Superintendent for Business, Ms. Alita Zuber, is working with our food service provider to consider what that might look like into the next school year. And the answer is yes. We're looking at that physical education. Here's what I want to share with physical education, art, health, all our classes, like physical education and art are critical components for our students. Clearly, we want them to read and write and be mathematicians, but the importance of physical health is really important during this period of time and always. And we don't want it to get lost in the structure of our regular school day and in the 2021 school year. So we need to work creatively, potentially, in the manner in which we offer that, because, again, just because of what the medical professionals are sharing with us, but don't want it lost in the context of the day. And similarly with recess and others. So we want to maintain some sense of normalcy for our children, what they can expect, some structure and expectations, being really clear for you, the parents, as well. The other side to it too, though, is we want to make sure that that we can do it, and we're prepared to evolve. We know that the manner in which we're going to provide and these important subject areas and what I would call core programs may need to shift than what we did traditionally in our schools.
Okay. If a parent, family member decides to homeschool their child, or if there's underlying health issues and they feel, what about that? And would they be provided? Also, do we have options if children have underlying health issues and a parent wants to do remote learning, if we go to scenario one with a full day program?
So you may have seen in the slide around health and safety that we're going to need to really assess who those students might be, and those are personal conversations to have with our nurses in the schools, but we'll try to formalize a process related to that, and certainly we're going to have to mitigate for that. Homeschooling is always an option, although obviously, as a superintendent, I want to assure you that the instruction that takes place in our schools is exceptional. However, I understand the safety concerns that families may have, and I'll respect it. But homeschooling is it's something that there is a process for. There are clear expectations that families need to achieve and follow if they're going to participate in or homeschool their child. So that's always been an option. But if you wanted to do it in this case, there is a process to follow and guidelines and expectations that need to be met as well.
Is there a target date for a decision on which scenario we will move forward with for the fall?
And I hope in this there's a sense, and I hope it's reassuring on some level, that there's been a lot of planning that's taken place to this point. And again, absent of any information, official information. When we will officially notify and let families know is contingent on what we hear from the state education department and the state. So as I said, the June 13th, sometime in June, I shouldn't say June 13th, sometime in June was when, or is when we expect the governor to issue guidance regarding things that we need to consider for school opening. We're going to need to dissect that and really carefully think about it. My hope for you, for our staff, and for our students is to make that decision as soon as we can. But I do hope too that we can do as much pre-planning, obviously with a week left of school, but certainly we're going to continue working over the course of the summer to make sure that we do what we need to do to make sure that we can open on time and as safely as we can. But a lot of that's going to be contingent on the state. Excuse me.
Is there any consideration if we do go stick with a virtual model, either part-time or full-time, to make the class size smaller? Some large class sizes that we have now, virtual or a challenge, is there any consideration made for that?
Yeah, so we have discussed different ways to social distance. There are some guidelines that are coming out in various states as it relates to that. We've worked hard as a district. I just want to put that be transparent about this, to address class size. That's always been a value of the families, the community, and one of mine, along with our teachers and educators. With that said, I think what's important is that We may contingent on a hybrid. A hybrid would involve, some kids in, some kids not, on various days. That could be an option. And certainly within that, the class size would be smaller than what currently exists. But again, all that's going to be contingent on the medical professionals and what they can provide. My hope is that I can, make sure it's consistent for all of us, and that we can get students in and staff in a safe manner as often as we can.
Okay. Is there any consideration for providing childcare to essential workers or just families in general on the days that children would not be in school if we went to a part-time or full-time virtual model for working?
Yeah, so we haven't. I would encourage you to put that into the chat box of something for us to consider. But again, I just share as a parent myself of 2 children, 1 5 and 1 7. I recognize and understand the challenges of having to have your child at home and yet at the same time, fulfill your work duties. So we're cognizant of that. In addition to obviously providing the best educational program that we can in either setting, but we're aware of what some of the families need. So I would put that in there. It has been discussed, but there has been no formal plans around that at all just yet.
Okay. Would we anticipate or planning the school calendar, changing it for the school year in general, possibly starting later, taking away winter breaks, spring breaks, if we did a full virtual, half virtual model?
Yeah, so a lot of that, I hope that the state education department gives us the flexibility that we need. I would just share that currently, as our calendar exists, there are calls for 2 superintendent conference days. Those are 2 days that we use to work with our staff, reconvene, to do some planning, allow our teachers and educators to prep their rooms and do everything that they need to for our students. 2 days seems like a short period of time, and again, contingent on how complex the plan is. So we may need to think about some flexibility just to make sure our educators are really, in addition to what we might be providing them and some of the work we're trying to share with them at this point, they may need that extra time, or we may need that extra time to open school. With that said, I don't want to, give you a sense of fear or saying that this is going to happen, but I do want to just share that out loud. It's something that, concerns me slightly in terms of, these are all new practices, all new protocols. It's not only educating families, but also educating those whom have to implement them within our school setting. So I don't know to what extent there'll be flexibility in the calendar, what it'll mean for our breaks and everything else associated with that. But I'm confident. Well, I'll say I'm hopeful that the state education department will issue something that we can consider, and obviously that's going to drive a lot of our work.
Okay. Ventilation systems in the classrooms and throughout the buildings. Have we looked at those systems now?
Yeah, so those are, as we speak, those are being looked at. Our director of facilities has his team looking at all them, knowing that this is going to be a question, and certainly from a health and safety perspective. So yes.
Okay. And do you want to just go over, Dr. Sanchez, some people are asking about summer slide and, what are we offering during the summer to help parents?
Sure. So there's a variety of things that we're looking at, and a lot of this information, not that I'm going to guide you, I'll answer them, and if you want to see some of the presentations, last night at the Board of Education meeting, there was an overview of what we're offering in the summer. We're looking at a variety of options. Number one, we want to open our summer programming to be much more project-based and to engage all students, particularly in our elementary schools, actually across the district, in the learning that they want to participate. So I'll just speak to the elementaries right now. There's a form that went out yesterday, I believe, where we're asking parents, some of the interests that your children have, so we can create some programming around that. They would not be all synchronous, they'd be all synchronous and much more project-based for our students, and engaging them in real activities to get them to get out, think creatively, and keep them engaged in learning. And also we're working very closely with our public library to make sure that they have a robust set of resources that we're helping, and we want to create hopefully some book clubs with kids and various others. We also have a partnership with PACE that'll continue into the summer to help support. They've been, it's been actually something we piloted this year through the COVID experience. And we have about close to, actually it's increasing, about 70 tutors that will be working with students over the course of the summer. The middle school will also be offering a program, and also the high school as well. So I would encourage you to maybe reach out to your supervisor or your principals, and they can give you more specific detail. With that said, too, I just want to share that we've been working really closely with our community. They care deeply about how our kids are engaged. Weekly, every Monday, I participate in meetings with our community leaders, and we're all talking about ways to get our students actively engaged over the course of the summer. And there's some creative ideas that we're looking at. And we're also looking truthfully at some of our partners. For example, we partner with Rockefeller. They may be offering a small program for some students, obviously with social distancing in mind and safety. But the point being is that there's a school base, there's a community base, and then we're looking at all our partners to help us as well elevate. So there is a sincere effort. Normally our program, particularly in the elementaries and actually across the district, has focused on some of our students that need some additional academic support, but we're seeking to open it to all. In addition to that, we're also, I've heard from a lot of dual language program parents, or we have, about providing some Spanish language opportunities, and that too is being considered, and we hope to offer that as well, embedded into our what we're calling our summer Explore and Learn program.
Okay. And if we do move forward with scenario 2 or 3, would parents have some more involvement in setting virtual expectations with teachers? Would we have opportunities to involve them a little bit more about what the parents feel the expectations should be?
Yeah, so I would just say that generally speaking, that I hope as we refine plans and we can get to a point where we can narrow down on a scope, that your feedback will be really important over the course of that time. So for example, if we get to scenario 2, we'll have that conversation with you. We'll hopefully kind of start to roll that out. And similarly, get your feedback, not only from an academic perspective, but other things that you may want us to consider. And hopefully we can get to that point, because then we can really narrow down and focus on one. So the answer to that is just a general yes, that every voice is really important. Our educators have already begun to reflect on some ideas and things that they feel we can improve on as practice, and some things that are working for us as well.
Okay. And I'll just give you a couple more, Dr. Sanchez. Field trips, if we moved to scenario 1, would field trips still be something we would be thinking and considering, class trips?
Yeah, so we're pausing on those right now. We haven't made a formal decision. I'm seeing it as a challenge right now for us to have field trips in the fall. So I wouldn't necessarily seek to cancel field trips. They're an integral part to our instructional year. So I just want to make sure, but the fall looks really, really tricky for us. So if there's already social distancing that's taking place on a regular bus ride, I can't see us really engaging in a lot of fall field trips, if not at all. I have not made any formal decision on that, because I'm just waiting, obviously, to dialogue with the Board of Education, but I'm also waiting for the guidance from the state.
Got it. And block schedule, have we considered for high school and middle school?
Yeah, so all those are being considered, and as soon as we narrow down the scope, we'll walk you through further, because our staff is working through various scenarios and ideas. But all those, we've thought about our middle school, just to give you a sense, limiting the amount of transitions that our kids take. Perhaps, and these are all just hypotheticals right now, but thinking about the educators moving versus the kids transitioning from class to class, because that would avoid students in the hallways. All those are being discussed at this point, but again, I share that with the caveat that nothing has been formalized just yet, but these are items that we're discussing at this point.
Okay. And sports?
Similar to everything else, the fall looks like the trickiest of all. And sincerely, I pause there, because these are really, really important, not only to our children. It's a sense of connection that they have to our schools. It's a sense of motivation, and there's just so many important aspects of falls clubs or sports clubs and others. but I'm hesitant to say yes or no just yet until we get the guidance. But I, just personally speaking, and having done the reading that I have, I see it as being a challenge for us. But I'm going to remain hopeful that, something kind of allows us to do it, or there's some safety measures that permit us to do that. Like, that would be scenario one for athletics, quite honestly.
Okay. And there's a lot of good feedback that's coming in. So again, I want to remind everybody that everything that everybody's posting on the chat is really information that we are going to take back and review. So everything here, we tried to answer most of the questions. I guess we can end, Dr. Sanchez, with, do you plan on doing more of these sessions, focus groups over the summer with parents as we get closer to a decision?
Yeah, so the answer is an immediate yes. We're going to use various formats to engage families. I understand that, some family members and community members wanted to participate, were unable to. I want to make sure that everyone is really, really clear. We're ahead of the guidance just yet. But what I want to assure families in doing this is that we're thinking, and that your thinking is really important. And as we begin to refine, as I noted before, my hope and our goal, not just mine, but I know that of all our educators, is to begin that discussion, continue to dialogue as we narrow the scenarios down to either scenario 1, 2, or 3. And my hope is that communication and the ideas we get help us make the best decisions for our children, address the concerns and apprehensions that individuals have, whether you're a staff member, whether it's a parent, or whether it's your child. We want to make sure that we're clear. So that's a long answer to a very sincere yes to various forums and various ways to gather feedback from all family members.
Okay.
Anything else, Nicole?
I think there's a lot coming in. I think that's, I'm hoping that summarizes most of the big questions that have been coming in. I think it looks like everything that's coming in now is feedback, recommendations. Somebody asked, I typed back, but I know they might be getting lost in the messages, if this session is being recorded, and it is. I don't know, do you want to just share, Dr. Sanchez, some final next steps? We could leave this chat.
Yeah, I'll leave. First of all, I just sincerely want to thank, it's actually humbling to see almost 300 plus parents and community members participating here tonight. I do hope, and you can put this in the chat, that that you found this helpful. Albeit I know I wasn't able to answer everything in very specific forms just yet, because we're just waiting. But I do hope and understand that we care deeply about the decisions we're making. We're talking very carefully about what this might look like for us. We need to give ourselves time, and that's why we started soon. Your voice matters, and that's why we're holding these conversations with you, and want to make sure that we're going to continue to do so. And I appreciate everything that you've done to help and support us, support our staff, and everyone during this period of time. So our family, our community, and others are going to be involved in this and need to help us in our continued conversations around this. So we're going to, right now we're waiting. Our community will soon provide us, or the state will provide us, the issuance of ideas. I'll share what some of those things are, and then we'll come back and dialogue. And parent involvement will be extremely important, as well as our community involvement. So thank you so much for your time. I want to thank Nicole for helping and answering, kind of monitoring those questions. And I hope everyone enjoys the last week of school next week. We'll continue to be in touch. Thank you, everybody, and have a good night. Nicole, you'll copy all these comments?
Yeah, I'm gonna leave the chat box open for about another 5 minutes. So if you want to type in any other final comments or feedback, we'll leave it open for 5 minutes, and then we will shut down the webinar and archive all the recommendations that came through. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.